Erwin Johannes Eugen Rommel was born on November 15, 1891, in the small town of Heidenheim and Erbrenz, in the Kingdom of Württemberg, Germany. He was the second of 5 children born to Erwin Rommel Sr., a teacher, and Helene von Loos, the daughter of a wealthy industrialist. From a young age, Rommel showed a keen interest in military history and tactics. He would often play war games with his siblings and read books about famous battles and commanders. However, his parents did not support his interest in the military, preferring that he pursue a more academic career. Despite their objections, Rommel joined the local army reserve when he was just 18 years old, and he quickly rose through the ranks. He attended officer training school in Danzig and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the German army in 1912. When World War I broke out in 1914, Rommel was sent to the Western Front as a platoon leader. He quickly distinguished himself as a brave and resourceful officer, and he was awarded the Iron Cross, second class, for his actions during the Battle of Lengui. In 1915, Rommel was promoted to captain and given command of a company of mountain troops. He led his men in a daring raid on a French position at the Col de la Chapelotte, which earned him the Palme Mérite, Germany's highest military honor. Over the next few years, Rommel continued to lead his men in successful attacks against the Allies. He was wounded several times, but he always returned to the front, eager to continue the fight. In 1917, Rommel was given command of a battalion of infantry, and he was sent to fight in Romania. He led his men in a series of successful attacks against the Romanian army, earning him the nickname the Ghost because of his ability to move his troops undetected through enemy lines. In 1918, Rommel was given command of the 124th Infantry Regiment, and he was sent to the Western Front once again. He led his men in a series of successful attacks against the British and French armies, earning him widespread praise and admiration. However, by the end of the war, Germany was facing defeat, and Rommel was forced to surrender his regiment to the Allies. He returned to Germany, demoralized and disillusioned by the outcome of the war. In the years that followed, Rommel struggled to find his place in post-war Germany. He briefly considered a career in politics but ultimately decided to remain in the military. He was sent to the military academy in Stuttgart, where he studied military history and tactics. In 1929, Rommel was given command of a battalion of infantry, and he was sent to the Middle East to serve as an advisor to the Jordanian army. While there, he studied the tactics of Arab guerrilla fighters, which would later influence his own military strategies. In 1937, Rommel was promoted to general and given command of the 7th Panzer Division, a new unit that had been created as part of Hitler's plan to expand the German army. Rommel quickly proved himself to be a brilliant commander, and he led his division to victory in several key battles during the invasion of France in 1940. Rommel's success in France earned him widespread praise and admiration, both from his fellow officers and from the German people. He was promoted to lieutenant general and given command of the Afrika Korps, a German army unit that had been sent to North Africa to support the Italian forces there. Over the next 2 years, Rommel led the Afrika Korps in a series of daring attacks against the British forces in North. Erwin Rommel was a German general during World War II who gained fame for his successes in North Africa and his innovative military tactics. He was known as the Desert Fox for his cunning and resourcefulness, and he became one of Adolf Hitler's most admired and trusted generals. Hitler first became aware of Rommel's talents during the invasion of France in 1940. Rommel was then a general in command of the 7th Panzer Division, and he led his division to victory in several key battles during the campaign. Hitler was impressed by Rommel's leadership and tactical skill, and he personally awarded Rommel the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. After the success in France, Hitler selected Rommel to lead the Afrika Korps, a German army unit that had been sent to North Africa to support the Italian forces there. Hitler saw the North African campaign as a key battleground in the war and believed that Rommel was the best man for the job. In North Africa, Rommel proved to be a brilliant commander, using innovative tactics and strategies to outmaneuver and defeat the British forces. Hitler closely followed the progress of the campaign and was impressed by Rommel's successes. In a letter to Rommel in 1942, Hitler wrote, "Your achievements in Africa are beyond measure. The greatness of your leadership lies in the fact that it is not limited to military matters, but extends to the entire situation." Hitler's admiration for Rommel went beyond his military successes, however. Hitler saw Rommel as a model of Aryan masculinity, and he admired Rommel's physical and mental toughness. Hitler also saw Rommel as a loyal and dedicated supporter of the Nazi cause, and he trusted him implicitly. In 1943, Rommel returned to Germany to recover from injuries he had sustained in an Allied air attack in North Africa. While he was recovering, Hitler appointed him to lead the defenses of the Atlantic Wall, a massive system of fortifications and defenses along the coast of Western Europe. Hitler believed that Rommel was the best man for the job because of his reputation as a brilliant military strategist and his ability to inspire his troops. However, Rommel was skeptical about the effectiveness of the Atlantic Wall and warned Hitler that it would not be enough to stop the Allied invasion of Europe. Despite his reservations, Rommel worked tirelessly to improve the defenses of the Atlantic Wall, ordering the construction of new fortifications and the placement of mines and other obstacles along the beaches. He also encouraged his troops to prepare for an Allied invasion and to fight to the death to defend their positions. In the weeks leading up to the D-Day invasion, Hitler relied heavily on Rommel's advice and guidance. Rommel warned Hitler that the Allies were likely to land at Normandy, and he urged him to concentrate German forces there. However, Rommel's warnings were not heeded, and the Allies landed at Normandy on June 6, 1944. Rommel was away from his headquarters at the time of the invasion, but he rushed back to his command post as soon as he heard the news. Despite his efforts, Rommel was unable to stop the Allied advance, and the German defenses on the Normandy beaches were quickly overwhelmed. Rommel was later implicated in a plot to assassinate Hitler and was given the choice of a public trial and execution or a private suicide. He chose the latter and died on October 14, 1944. Throughout his career, Erwin Rommel was admired and respected by many people, including his fellow officers, the German people, and Adolf Hitler himself. Although his legacy has been overshadowed by his association with the Nazi regime, he remains one of the most talented and innovative military commanders of the 20th century. Erwin Rommel's invasion of Tobruk in 1941 was a critical turning point in the North African campaign during World War II. The port city of Tobruk, located on the eastern coast of Libya, was a key strategic objective for the German and Italian forces in North Africa. Its capture would enable the Axis powers to control the Mediterranean and to cut off British supply lines to their troops in Egypt. Rommel had been appointed commander of the German Africa Corps in February 1941, and he had quickly launched a series of offensives against the British forces in North Africa. By April, Rommel had pushed the British back to the Egyptian border, but he lacked the resources to launch a full-scale invasion of Egypt. Instead, Rommel decided to focus his efforts on capturing Tobruk. The city was heavily fortified, with a garrison of around 25,000 British and Commonwealth troops, but Rommel believed that he could take the city with a combination of fast-moving armored units and well-coordinated infantry attacks. On April 10, 1941, Rommel launched his attack on Tobruk. The German and Italian forces began their assault with a massive artillery barrage, targeting the British defences and paving the way for the advance of the armoured units. The British defenders fought bravely, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the German tanks and infantry. The Germans were able to break through the British lines and advance into the city, where they engaged in fierce street fighting with the defenders. Despite the fierce resistance, the Germans were able to capture key strategic points in the city, including the harbour and the airfield. With control of the harbour, the Germans were able to bring in supplies and reinforcements, while the airfield allowed them to launch air attacks against the British positions. Over the next several weeks, the Germans and Italians continued their assault on the British positions in Tobruk. The defenders fought back with determination, but they were slowly pushed back, and by May 12, the Germans had captured the city. The capture of Tobruk was a significant victory for Rommel and the Axis powers in North Africa. It gave them control of a key port and airfield, and it cut off the British supply lines to their troops in Egypt. It also boosted the morale of the German and Italian troops, who had been fighting a grueling campaign in the desert. However, the victory at Tobruk did not lead to the ultimate triumph that Rommel had hoped for. The British were able to regroup and launch a counter-attack, and Rommel was forced to retreat back to the Libyan border. Despite the eventual Allied victory in North Africa, the invasion of Tobruk remains a significant moment in the history of World War II. It demonstrated Rommel's tactical skill and leadership, and it showed the world that the German and Italian forces were capable of defeating the British in the desert. Battle of the Worlds in Egypt. Perhaps you are referring to the Battle of El Alamein, which was a significant turning point in the North African campaign during World War II and resulted in the defeat of Erwin Rommel's forces in Egypt. In the summer of 1942, Rommel's forces had advanced to within 60 miles of Alexandria, the major city in Egypt. However, they were running low on supplies, and their lines of communication were stretched thin. The British forces, under the command of General Bernard Montgomery, had been preparing for a counter-attack, and in October 1942, they launched a major offensive against the German and Italian forces. The battle began with a massive artillery barrage, followed by an infantry assault that aimed to break through the German lines. The British forces were supported by a large number of tanks and artillery, which allowed them to quickly gain ground and push back the Axis forces. Despite fierce resistance from the German and Italian troops, the British were able to make steady progress, and by the end of the first day of the battle, they had penetrated several miles into the German lines. Over the next several days, the British continued to push forward, inflicting heavy casualties on the Axis forces and taking control of key strategic points. Rommel attempted to mount a counter-attack, but his forces were stretched thin and he was unable to break through the British lines. The British, meanwhile, were able to maintain their momentum and continue their advance. After 2 weeks of intense fighting, the Axis forces were on the brink of collapse. Rommel ordered a retreat, and his forces began to withdraw westward towards Tunisia. The British pursued the retreating forces, but they were unable to completely destroy them, and Rommel was able to regroup and continue the fight. The Battle of El Alamein was a major victory for the Allied forces in North Africa. It marked the first time that the German and Italian forces had been defeated in a major battle in the desert, and it marked the beginning of the end for Rommel's campaign in North Africa. The battle also boosted the morale of the British and Commonwealth troops, who had been fighting a grueling campaign in the desert for over 2 years. Erwin Rommel was eventually forced to return to Germany for treatment in October 1942, following the defeat of his forces at the Battle of El Alamein. He had been suffering from a serious illness, likely either jaundice or a kidney stone, and his condition had worsened over the course of the campaign in North Africa. Rommel's return to Germany was not without controversy. Adolf Hitler was furious with him for the defeat at El Alamein, and there were rumors that Rommel had disobeyed orders and retreated without permission. Some members of the Nazi Party saw Rommel as a potential rival to Hitler and were eager to discredit him. Despite these tensions, Rommel was initially treated with respect in Germany. He was given medical treatment and allowed to recuperate in peace. However, as the war continued to turn against Germany, Rommel became increasingly disillusioned with the Nazi regime. He began to express doubts about Hitler's leadership and to advocate for peace negotiations with the Allies. In July 1944, Rommel was implicated in a plot to assassinate Hitler and was given the choice of either facing trial and likely execution or taking his own life. Rommel chose the latter option and was given a state funeral with full military honors. Erwin Rommel's return to Germany for treatment was a critical moment in his life and career. It marked the beginning of the end of his campaign in North Africa and his eventual disillusionment with the Nazi regime. Despite his eventual involvement in the plot to assassinate Hitler, Rommel remains a controversial figure in German history, with some seeing him as a hero and others as a willing participant in the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime. Erwin Rommel was indeed forced to commit suicide in October 1944, following his implication in a plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. The circumstances surrounding his death remain a topic of controversy and debate. After being implicated in the plot, Rommel was given the choice of either facing trial and likely execution or taking his own life. He chose the latter option and was given a cyanide pill by a fellow officer. Rommel took the pill while sitting in his car and died shortly thereafter. The story of the siege of Rommel's house by the Gestapo in front of his family is a matter of some dispute. Some sources suggest that the Gestapo did indeed surround Rommel's house and force him to take the cyanide pill, while others argue that he took it voluntarily and in private. Regardless of the specifics of his death, it is clear that Rommel's family was present when he died, and that they were deeply affected by the event. Following Rommel's death, he was given a solemn military funeral ceremony. The ceremony was attended by thousands of mourners, including high-ranking Nazi officials and military officers. Rommel was given a hero's farewell, with his coffin draped in the Nazi flag and carried on a gun carriage by soldiers in full dress uniform. The funeral ceremony was a highly choreographed event, designed to convey the message that Rommel had been a loyal and patriotic German officer who had been unfairly targeted by the Nazi regime. His death was portrayed as a tragic loss for Germany, and his military accomplishments in North Africa were highlighted. Despite the elaborate ceremony, Rommel's death remained a source of controversy in Germany. Many Germans saw him as a hero who had fought bravely for his country, while others criticized him for his role in the Nazi regime and for his actions during the war. Today, Erwin Rommel remains a complex and controversial figure in German history. While his military achievements are widely recognized, his association with the Nazi regime and his involvement in war crimes continue to be the subject of debate and scrutiny. In conclusion, the life of Erwin Rommel was a complex and controversial one. He was a talented military commander who achieved great success on the battlefield, particularly during his campaign in North Africa. However, his association with the Nazi regime and his involvement in war crimes have cast a shadow over his legacy. Rommel was initially attracted to the Nazi Party's message of national renewal and saw himself as a patriot fighting for the good of his country. He rose quickly through the ranks of the German military, earning a reputation as an innovative and daring commander. His success in North Africa made him a hero to many Germans, and he was celebrated as a symbol of German military prowess. However, Rommel's association with the Nazi regime became increasingly problematic as the war progressed. He was implicated in a number of war crimes, including the execution of Allied prisoners of war and the use of forced labor. His support for Hitler and the Nazi Party also became a liability, particularly as the tide of the war began to turn against Germany. Rommel's eventual disillusionment with the Nazi regime was a turning point in his life. His return to Germany for treatment marked the end of his campaign in North Africa and the beginning of his eventual involvement in the plot to assassinate Hitler. While his precise role in the plot remains a matter of debate, there is little doubt that he was disillusioned with Hitler and had come to see the war as a futile and destructive endeavor. Rommel's death, whether it was voluntary or forced, was a tragic end to a controversial life. His military accomplishments were celebrated at his funeral, but his association with the Nazi regime and his involvement in war crimes remained a source of controversy. Today, his legacy remains a complex and contested one, with some seeing him as a hero and others as a willing participant in the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime. Ultimately, the story of Erwin Rommel's life serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of blind loyalty and the consequences of following an ideology without question. His legacy reminds us that even those who achieve great success and renown can be flawed and fallible, and that the actions of individuals can have profound consequences for the course of history.
Trumpfen. Wir stürmen die Teufel hervor, versalzen den Raum in die Sumpfen. Wir fürchten nicht Hetze und bösen an, wir trotzen den Los und den Sonnenbrand. Marschieren ein flammender Trommel, vorwärts, vorwärts, vorwärts mit unserem Rommel, vorwärts mit unserem Rommel. Die Briten fürchten uns wie die Pest, sie sitzen auf glühenden Kohlen. Wir brechen durch Ost und brechen sie fest, das einzig uns Weige gestohlen. Sind Churchill und Roosevelt auf Boden Wand, wir werfen die Feinde in jedem Land. Es schlägt General auf die Trommel, vorwärts, vorwärts, vorwärts mit unserem Rommel, vorwärts mit unserem Rommel. Mit uns im Kampf und im Siege vereint, marschieren Italien-Scharen, bis einst die Sonne des Friedens uns scheint und wieder für Deutschland wir fahren. Doch wenn mich die feindliche Kronen fasst, so lasset mich ruhen im bösen Sand und rühren noch einmal die Trommel. Vorwärts, vorwärts, vorwärts mit unserem Rommel, vorwärts mit unserem Rommel. im Siege vereint, marschieren Italien-Scharen, bis einst die Sonne des Friedens uns scheint und wieder wir Deutschland wir fahren. Doch wenn mich die feindliche Kugel fasst, so lassen mich ruhen im wüsten Sand und rühren noch einmal die Trommel. Vorwärts, vorwärts, vorwärts mit unseren Trommeln, vorwärts mit unseren Trommeln. Trumpfen. Wir stürmen die Teufel hervor, versalzen den Korn wie die Suppe. Wir fürchten die Netze und bösen an, wir trotzen den Los und den Sonnenbrand. Marschieren ein Klang mit der Trommel. Vorwärts, vorwärts, vorwärts mit unseren Trommeln. Vorwärts mit unseren Trommeln. Die Briten fürchten uns wie die Pest. Sie sitzen auf glühenden Kohlen. Wir brechen durch Ost und brechen sie fest. Das Leipzig uns Weige gestohlen. Sind Churchill und Roosevelt auf Boden Wand. Wir werfen die Feinde in jedem Land. Es schlägt General auf die Trommel. Vorwärts, vorwärts, vorwärts mit unseren Trommeln. Vorwärts mit unseren Trommeln. Mit uns im Kampf und im Siegesverein marschieren Italien-Scharen, bis einst die Sonne des Friedens uns scheint und wieder für Deutschland wir fahren. Doch wenn mich die feindliche Bogen fasst, so lasst mich ruhen im bösen Sand und rühren noch einmal die Trommel.